literature is populated with characters. Of course, that is generally what literature is given to, the interactions between characters. But what are the greatest characters in literature, if such a thing can be said? Well, that is what I have undertaken to explore today in this video. The top 10 greatest characters in all of literature, according to me. Of course, this is entirely subjective. However, it is not entirely arbitrary. I do have reasoning and logic behind my picks here, which I hope to elucidate as I go. Uh, not many rules, only just that the characters I have chosen here I choose because they mean a great deal to me or they embody a very well developed person in a story or such as that. I'm not trying to say that the characters I have chosen here on this list are, necessarily the legitimate 10 greatest in all of literature. Of course not. Again, this is subjective. All I'm saying is that these characters I have chosen are because I believe they are very well realized fictitious people or because they mean a great deal to me personally. The only real rule, I suppose, is that I'm strictly choosing characters which I believe can be said to be rounded and developed to a sufficient degree to actually, merit choosing them. I'm not going to choose Judge Holden or Mr. Kurtz or Cthulhu or anything like that because those really aren't the greatest characters. They play very important roles in their respective stories, but they're not very well developed and they're meant more to serve a purpose in the story rather than be a fully fleshed out character. So I'm restricting myself only to characters which I believe are human to a degree and sufficiently realized as human and rounded and fleshed out and such. So though that is the rule, such as it is. So let's get started. Number 10, Holden Caulfield, The Catcher in the Rye. Okay, hold up right out the gate. I know this book is one of the most polarizing books in existence. There are loads of people out there who despise this book and despise this book because of this character. However, there are also loads of people out there who adore this book and adore this book because of this character. And the fact that this character elicits such divisive responses among readers, I believe that says something. And also, I believe this character is immensely important because whether you love this book or hate it, it was a watershed book. I don't believe there had ever been a book prior to The Catcher in the Rye that so perfectly captured teenage angst. Um, I personally just I personally have fond memories of reading this book, although I no longer really in I don't I no longer really lionize it to the degree that I shamefully once perhaps did. I've kind of outgrown, what it's about, but I still absolutely do recognize its importance. It is a fantastic book. It is one of the most symbolism heavy books I think you can possibly read because nearly every page on this in this book is dripping with symbolism and symbolic content, and it is a great book. I mean, you can hate it because of you can say Holden is a whiny, self-absorbed, pretentious little twat, and you would be absolutely correct in that assessment. But he also has spoken for numerous generations of kids and gave a voice to a lot of the things that they were feeling. And so, as a result of that, I really do think that Holden Caulfield is, to me at least, again, the 10th greatest character in all of literature. Number 9, Hester Prynne, The Scarlet Letter. So, this book is notorious for being the book that kills a lot of students' potential for a love of reading during their lives when they are assigned it in high school because it is boring as watching paint dry. It is written in a very archaic style, and it really does just make you want to pull your eyes out of your head when you're reading it, if you are not really down for that kind of thing. I actually did a video on this, one of the earliest videos I did, talking about the Scarlet Letter, and I called it a surprisingly painless experience. I actually kind of enjoyed this book. Okay, maybe enjoy is too strong of a word. I did not mind reading this book, and it didn't have the effect on me as it does on a lot of young people reading it when they are made to read it. And I reiterate a point that I made in that video. Books such as this should never be assigned in school because it will do more harm than good. A lot of kids probably read this and think that this is what reading all books are like, and that's terrible. But it is a very important novel, and Hester Prynne is a very, very important protagonist because she was possibly the first, if not the first, certainly among the first major female protagonists in American letters. She is kind of indomitable. The book is kind of just about perseverance and maintaining pride and dignity in the face of indignity and scorn. And Hester Prynne is a pretty good protagonist. Now there is some stuff in it that hasn't aged all that well. How her main regret in life is that she just can't find a man or whatnot. That may not go down that well today. But by and large, this book was definitely ahead of its time, and it treats Hester with a great degree of respect and dignity. And so, as a result of that, I think Hester Prynne is a very important protagonist, and she is a really great role model because she never buckles, she never gives in, even when the whole weight of the society in which she lives is turned against her. She never lets it get her down, and she keeps her head held high, start to finish. And yeah, that is admirable, if nothing else. So yeah, number 9, Hester Prynne, The Scarlet Letter. Number 8, Long John Silver, Treasure Island. So I love anything with pirates in it, okay? I'm a big sucker for pirates. And so, of course, I had to read Treasure Island at some point. And I actually read this book years ago, and I will always remember that Long John Silver really stole the show. He is one of the most complex and intriguing characters that you're probably ever going to read in a first person novel that is not the narrator, because Treasure Island is told from the first person. And as I have said numerous times, when you're writing in first person, a lot of times the secondary characters aren't really that well rounded because obviously you're not in their heads, you're in the head of the narrator. But Long John Silver really leaps off the page in this book. He is very complex. He is very nuanced and multifaceted, and his personality shifts from scene to scene like a chameleon because he is always whatever he needs to be to come out on top in any given situation. He is, I think, a very, very old precursor to characters such as like Hannibal Lecter later on, because he is one of those quintessential villains who you secretly kind of root for. He is not a good guy. He kills people and he is very greedy and ruthless, but yet he is also undeniably a badass. He kind of has a surrogate father son relationship with Jim Hawkins in the story, and that just adds yet another layer to his character. And trust me, when you read Treasure Island, you will come away remembering no character more so than Long John Silver. And his presence just dominates this book. He is so kind of just suave, and he really is just a badass. And so because of that, I'm saying Long John Silver is one of the 10 greatest characters, again, to me, in all of literature. Number 7, Hamlet, from Hamlet, the play. So this character needs no introduction. Hamlet is arguably the most famous work of literature ever written, and probably the most acclaimed work of literature ever written. This is really the one work that I think the vast majority of Western works of literature, at least, exist in the shadow of. This is, people debate what Shakespeare's best play is. It is Hamlet. Okay, it's let the debate end now. It is not King Lear like some people assert. King Lear is crap compared to Hamlet. I'm just going to throw that out there. Hamlet is Shakespeare's magnum opus, and the titular character in this play is one of the most psychologically complex and multifaceted characters ever written. And that is not to say that he is necessarily the most likable character. He is kind of a tool. I mean, I'll say that. Hamlet is kind of a douchebag. Not kind of. He is a douchebag in this play, but we understand him on such an intrinsic level that we can't help but, still like him, even though a lot of the deeds that he does in the play are actually quite despicable. Um, his soliloquies in this play, who doesn't know to be or not to be? It is the most cliched line in the English language, but it is also one of the most profound because that really is the ultimate question, is it not, to be or not to be? And this play, it's entertaining, it's action packed, it ends as the majority of Shakespeare's tragedies do, in a bloodbath. So I mean, it is entertaining to watch when you're seeing it on the stage or on screen, but it is also remarkably profound. And Hamlet himself is remarkably profound because he is one of the most introspective protagonists ever written, or at least written up until that point. And so, yeah, no question, no hesitation. Hamlet is definitely one of the 10 greatest characters ever created in literature. Number 6, The Underground Man. Notes from Underground. So, this character doesn't even have a name. If you've never read Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky, please do. I consider it a necessary read. It is one of the most illuminative and enlightening books that I have personally ever read. It made me look at things in such an in-depth light that it made me consider things I had never considered up until that point. And for my money, the Brothers Karamazov is generally considered Dostoevsky's masterpiece. I disagree. I think this is. This is not even a novel. This is a novella. And I really do think that this is probably his most important contribution to world literature because I think it is his most profound. And the Underground Man, the nameless character whose or whose notes, I guess, the book is presented as, um, is one of the most unique characters I think you can read. I don't really know that there had been a character quite like that prior to that book. He's kind of pathetic and yet he makes sense. That's the thing. Like you kind of sneer at him a little bit because he is so weaselly and kind of again pathetic, but yet he makes so much sense throughout the book. And the trick of it is that you come around to seeing it from his perspective whenever he's laying it out and you realize that like what he's saying is pretty much bulletproof. And what Dostoevsky did with Notes from Underground is look at humanity and human nature in under such a high-powered lens. I mean, he was really thinking about things that I don't think anybody had really quite scrutinized in that level of depth uh, prior to that point. It's deep. This book is deep, and the copy that I have is only like 90 pages long. Again, it's not a novel, it's just a novella. You can probably read it in like a day, and it is deep. It is one of the deepest books I have ever read. It it really did just show me things that I've never considered. And the Underground Man is not the most likable protagonist because again, he is kind of pathetic, but he says a lot of important stuff and a lot of important stuff that I don't think anyone else had said up until that point. So The Underground Man, yeah, definitely, all the way. Number five, Captain Ahab, Moby Dick. So at the end of last year, or close to the end of last year, I finally conquered Moby Dick. That book was not always fun, but it was amazing. It had me in awe of it. And largely because of Captain Ahab. I don't think that Moby Dick is the greatest book ever written, but I do think it is probably the greatest American book ever written, and I do wholeheartedly believe that Captain Ahab is probably the greatest character in American literature because he is something. He is a powerhouse of a character. There is probably no greater portrait of obsession and monomania that you will read than Captain Ahab. He's also, a lot of people say he is a villain. I don't think he's a villain. He's more akin to a tragic anti hero because we do understand his point of view, and that is a testament to this book's power, is that it makes us largely kind of agree with the point of view of a man who is doggedly pursuing a whale over something that every other character in the book acknowledges as insane. But when you hear him talk, and I made a video on Moby Dick. I think it's the longest video I have ever done. It's like an hour and 40 minutes long. Check that out if you want to hear my full thoughts on Moby Dick, and I go really deep into it in that video. But Captain Ahab, when he gives these his grand soliloquies about the pasteboard masks and how reality is an illusion, and behind everything there is a greater something that may not be the nicest something, and when you understand his reasoning, his cosmic mesotheistic kind of reasoning, you do understand him, and you kind of are actually kind of rooting for him, even though you consciously realize this is insane, this guy is insane, but still you get him and you kind of want to see him win, or at different points, I guess you kind of do. You kind of do at different points, I suppose. But he is just such a memorable character, and again, yeah, I think he really does tower over pretty much all other characters in American fiction. So yeah, Captain Ahab. Number four, The Monster from Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So if you don't know by now, Frankenstein is my favorite novel of all time. I believe wholeheartedly that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the pinnacle of all human literature, and I say that because I don't think any other book has ever captured in such few pages the full breadth of the human experience. Watch my video that I did on this book, my number one favorite book of all time video. It's like an hour and a half long. I go through this book top to bottom, and I explain my reasoning for saying that Frankenstein is, to me, the pinnacle of all human literary achievement because everything in life is in the pages of this book. It is about life, death, love, hate, creation, creator. It is about pretty much virtually everything, again, in the human experience is in this book. And it's all centered around this character, the nameless monster, and it's very important that he does not have a name. Um, and Mary Shelley she continues to surprise you throughout this book. And again, you have to abandon all your preconceived notions of this book when you start to read it because it is not like the movies, or not like most of them. Um, he is not a shambling, mindless, killing machine idiot. He is arguably more intelligent than his creator, and he is righteously pissed and righteously hurt that he has been abandoned and shunned by everyone and everything. And his character in this book is unforgettable. Mary Shelley does the ultimate pull the rug out from under your feet whenever you get to volume two. or volume 3, whichever one it was, where you get to read his side of the story, and you're just like, because up until that point, you're like, oh, this thing is complete evil. He's killing people, and then when you get to that point, you're like, why would he not kill people at that point? Again, this character is just phenomenal. Absolutely. I mean, one of the greatest, obviously one of the greatest characters ever, and the centerpiece of the greatest book ever to me. So yeah, the monster all the way. Number 3, Edna Pontellier, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. So yeah, The Awakening is my fourth favorite book of all time. I did a video on that. You can also check out. Her character is definitely one of the most important characters, because the things that Kate Chopin was saying with this book desperately needed saying, but they were said, alas, um, way ahead of their time, and so it killed her career. But Edna Pontellier she's a personal hero to me because she gives no shits. This is a book about not caring what other people think and living your own life without considering the restraints and the constraints that society places upon you. Edna Pontellier is a woman living in a time when it was not it was not really that fun to be a woman, but she stops caring and she goes her own way, and it is glorious to read. I love her character. I don't know that I really like the ending because I thought she deserved better than that, but then again, I guess there's really only one way it could have ended. But still, her character is so important to me, and it should by rights be important to. I mean, that's perhaps a bit presumptuous of me to speak on behalf of the entire female gender, but she should by rights be important to you if you are a woman out there, because she was fighting for your rights before that was an in vogue kind of thing to do. So yeah, just read The Awakening. It's a really short book. You can read it in a day or two. But it is a landmark book, and Edna Pontellier is a landmark character. And number 2, you're probably going to think I'm trolling with this one, but I assure you I am not. My number 2 greatest character in all of world literature to me is, of course, it's Batman. You know, I do, to begin with, in order to even put this character here, I have to say, do I consider comic books literature? Yes, I do. Comic books by now have proved themselves to the people who, I mean, pay attention and actually read them. Comic books have proved themselves to be a viable medium with which to tell meaningful and impactful stories that have real literary value to them. Watchmen, a lot of basically all of Alan Moore's stuff, but also The Dark Knight Returns with Batman in it. Um, Comic books can be literature, I think, and I Batman is inarguably the greatest character to ever spring from the pages of a comic book. Bob Kane and Bill Finger did not have a clue what they had created when they created Batman, but now he has come to be one of the most iconic and recognizable and endlessly fascinating characters in the world. Who doesn't know Batman? Who doesn't like Batman? I mean, and name me one other comic book character that is used in introduction to psychology classes to explain trauma and obsession. I mean, Batman psychology is probably the most complex out of any uh, comic book character ever, and he is the reigning king of the superheroes. I mean, Superman is the quintessential superhero, but Batman is the best superhero. And Batman has been my hero since I was 9. I mean, since I was 9, I would hurry home after school and watch episodes of the old animated series. Kevin Conroy's Batman was like a second father to me. I would have quite literally given my left testicle to be Robin in that show. I mean, that's how much I love Batman. And again, I said there this was not arbitrary. Again, this character has legitimate value to him. His psychology His mindset is so complex that he is actually used in college courses when in psychology class. I mean, he is the ultimate badass, because all the other members of the Justice League and whatnot, despite not having any kind of powers of his own, he is the one that everyone lives in fear of because they know that he is the most dangerous. And he never gives up, he never backs down, and if there is a way to win in any scenario, he will find it given enough time. And so as a result of that, Batman is my number two because he means a lot to me. There has been more than one situation in my life where I've had to ask myself, what would Batman do? And, again, I really do count this character as one of the best ever created. So, yeah, fight me if you want. It's a hill I'm willing to die on. Batman is my number two favorite character in all of literature. And number one, I have mentioned this character in a previous video, I think, as being the character which all other characters in literature exist in the shadow of, and I stand by that because I'm saying it again here. My number one greatest character in all of literature, and for my money, the greatest character ever written and that ever can be written, and it is Satan from Paradise Lost. This character was unlike any character hitherto written. It was the true dawn of the anti-hero. And there are innumerable characters in existence today that owe a debt to this one. I will not say that everybody is probably going to enjoy reading Paradise Lost. It's really hard. The language is hard to grasp at times. It's really boring too, despite the subject matter. But when this character speaks in that poem, you listen because the speeches that he makes are the greatest I think that have ever been written. His soliloquies are the most grandiose and eloquent that have ever been penned. And it is humorous to me that the effect that this poem has is kind of an inversion of its original intent. Whenever John Milton wrote Paradise Lost, he was writing for a pretty much 100% Christian audience. And so he felt no need, therefore, to color the opposing party, that is God, in pretty colors because he assumed that everyone reading the poem it would just be given that they would already view things that way. But now, reading this in today's vastly more secular world, this reads like a treatise on Satanism. And that is hilarious because that is the absolute opposite effect that it was supposed to have. But nevertheless, it does remain that Satan, as written by John Milton in Paradise Lost, I truly do hold as the greatest character ever devised because he forces you to run the whole gamut of emotions from triumph or a false sense of triumph to a crushing sense of despair, and finally just to a numb resolution. The speeches he makes are so grandiloquent that every writer wants to be able to emulate that kind of thing, such as, so farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear. All good to me is lost, evil be thou my good. My poor delivery of that probably doesn't do it justice, but when you read it in this poem, it is chilling. And of course, the most badass line ever written, the most badass line that ever can be written, Satan's immortal line, it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. I mean, you can't read this poem and then not root for him after you read that line. It's just impossible. Again, you can read this poem from whatever religious standpoint that you identify with, but you will root for Satan when you're reading this because he is that compelling of a character. And it is truly just something to behold when you read this because you recognize, after you read this, you see so many other characters. You see the germs of so many, the seeds of so many other characters within this one that we recognize today. All the edgy anti-heroes that we, take for granted today all come back to this character. And again, the effect that the poem has been almost entirely inverted, because nobody reads this and identifies with heaven. They only identified with hell. And I mean, if you don't believe me, just read it. And I mean, I'm not going to say that everybody's going to enjoy it, because it's hella, pun intended, hella boring, and also ridiculously hard to grasp. But if you can grasp it, and if you can just let the power of the words sink in, and just, sit there and kind of revel in it, you really will just be swept away by this character. Now, I'm not going to defend the whole of Paradise Lost. It is ridiculously misogynistic, and it is right out the gate. It is like getting bitch slapped with a heaping dose of misogyny right out the gate. Women are stupid, and they exist only to make their husbands look good and do good things. That's the overriding message that you're supposed to take away here. Kind of sorry to, I hate that, but that does not tarnish the image of this character right here, which is, I really do think, the greatest character ever written. If you can name me a greater character than John Milton's Satan, name it. Let me know down in the comments what it is, because I would love to read it. This is, I think, the pinnacle of character writing in human fiction, and that is Satan as written by John Milton in Paradise Lost. So, yeah, that is my list, my entirely subjective, but not without reason, list of the 10 greatest characters in all of human literature as seen by me. Let me know definitely down in the comments what you think, whether you agree or disagree with any of my picks here today. I know there's a lot probably to disagree with, but I believe there's also a lot to agree with. And if you do disagree, let me know also what you would substitute in lieu of my choices. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, leave a like, subscribe, help the channel out a little bit. And until next time, peace.